Hello, everybody. Today we're going to do a fun lecture. This one's, kind of neat. These are slides about what it means to operate at Facebook scale, and these were given to me by an RIT alum. His name is what is his name? It is Chuck Rossi, and Chuck Rossi was recruiting down the atrium one time, probably 4 years ago, and I went down and started talking to him, and then we went to lunch and had a really nice chat together. So gave me his slides and said that these are the real numbers, like I said, from probably 4 years ago, and it really represents the scale at which Facebook operates. Now, the thing to take away from these slides is just that the incredible amount of processing, the incredible amount of data that they push around. Facebook scale is really impressive. So I just want you to get a feel for that, and then use that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about why are we doing all this stuff? Why does it really matter? So moving at Facebook speed was Chuck Rossi's, Chuck R at facebook.com. That's still his email address as far as I know. So every 30 minutes at Facebook, every 30 minutes, 10 terabytes of logs gets loaded into Hadoop. So that means that 10 terabytes of log entries get harvested from machines, and then they push them into Hadoop, which is a large-scale file system that works really well with analytics and works really well with huge numbers of spinning disks. Hadoop is really neat in that it can handle when you have lots of spinning disks, you're going to have lots of failures of disks, and Hadoop can deal with that. And it's a really cool file system. Take my storage course, we talk about it. 105 terabytes of data is scanned via Hive. Hive is a tool that's used as part of a big data analytics kind of program, and so you can see how much data they're actually working with every half hour. Every half hour. 6 million photos are uploaded. So, those old people that use Facebook take a lot of pictures and upload those. Now, each one of those pictures needs to be processed, it needs to be stored, it needs to be thumbnail generated for it. There's lots of stuff that needs to happen with each one of those photos. Well, there's 6 million of them every half hour. 160 million news feed stories are created. So when you look at why Facebook can't control fake news on its site, I mean it's just a volume thing. How could you possibly control 160 million news feed stories? How could you write an algorithm that would analyze them, let alone have any people look at them? So it's just a monster. It's a Goliath. 5 billion real-time messages are sent. Now this is Messenger, and of course the neat thing about Messenger was that it was only a few years old when these numbers were put together. And look at the amount of usage that it gets. So if you think about something like WhatsApp now, WhatsApp not really popular in the U.S., but it isn't popular in the rest of the world. So, there's just a lot of messaging that has to happen. Each one has a source and a destination. It's got to go through the networks. It's got to be processed. It's just a lot of stuff that needs to happen. 10 billion profile pics are served. So, when someone goes to their Facebook page and you see all those little profile pics along the side of all the messages, that's what these are. And there's 10 billion of them that get served. Now, remember, it's not as though everybody gets served the same ones. This is 10 billion, but they have to be picked and sorted and sent to the right profiles so that the right people see them. Now, some of the pictures get sent to a lot of profiles. If you think about something like somebody like Taylor Swift or one of the Kardashians or I don't know anybody, somebody who's popular, then their profile pictures are going to be sent to a huge number of people. Then compared to people like me, my profile pic gets sent to a much, much, much smaller number of people, probably once a month or so. So there's a different class of images that are saved in this application. Some that get served very frequently, a really small number of those, and then a really large number of pics that get served only much more seldomly. So just moving 10 billion profile pics is complicated, but then to move them to the right location, that's really complex. 108 billion queries run on MySQL. Now, why MySQL? Because that's what Facebook is. It's a MySQL app. And it's popular. So, 108 billion queries get run on this. Just shows that it's popular, it's used, it's a database. That's all it is, with a fancy front end on it. As I recall, Chuck Rossi told me that the Facebook image that gets pushed out to all of the Facebook servers is about 1.5 gigs. And then that's what gets the Facebook servers are kind of like web servers that interact with back-end MySQL servers to generate the content that goes out to the Facebook servers and then gets pushed out to the users. So this is a lot of queries. 200 billion objects checked and 300 million objects blocked. Well, this is real. This is probably one of the more interesting numbers, mostly because it talks about how effective the security and privacy controls are on Facebook. We're all supposed to use those privacy controls so that we only share the things we want to share with our friends, some things with our friends, some things with everybody. Well, if 200 billion objects are checked and only 300 million objects are blocked, that means to me that people just aren't using those privacy controls very much. So, fascinating number, because it gets that even if you do come up with good privacy controls, people probably aren't going to use them. This is the big T one. 3.8 trillion cache operations. So, what does this say about the way that Facebook works? It's got a lot of stuff that it maintains in a cache. And when it maintains that in a cache, it avoids all that seek and all the fragmentation of all those hard drives that are out there. And by storing a lot of it in cache memory, it's a lot faster, it's a lot more efficient because you don't have to spin those drives as much, and it makes it so that you can push content out to lots of different people. There's Taylor Swift's picture again. It's going out to tons and tons and tons of people all around the world, and her profile is probably kept in cache at all times. My profile, probably once a month when somebody requests it, it gets loaded off a hard drive into cache for a little bit, and then it times out from the cache because it hasn't been requested again, so they knock it out of the cache. So this just really gets at the scale of Facebook and why it's so important that they have the tools that we're talking about here to make it all work. Without the tools that we're talking about here, and that's configuration management, it's the architectures that we talk about, it's the DevOps operations, it's all of that kind of stuff is required to operate at this incredible scale. So where does all this stuff come from? Where did DevOps and everything come from? Well, DevOps was originally, this was really the first really groundbreaking presentation that happened around DevOps, and this was at the O'Reilly conference, and it was in 2009 by John Allspaw and Paul Hammond, and it was 10 deploys per day, DevOps and operation, Dev and Ops cooperation at Flickr. And the thing that was so neat was that nobody thought you could do 10 deploys per day. That was just, outrageously large number of deploys per day. Nobody thought that you could do it. And here these two guys came along and said, no, no, no. We spent a whole bunch of time on developing the tools that we need to have to do this kind of work. And this is what actually happened. And so if you want to see the start of the whole DevOps movement, it's this video. And it's really interesting. Still out there. Take a look at it if you want to. Pretty cool. This is another Ben Rockwood, I'm sorry, is another really interesting guy in the whole DevOps movement. He was at Joyent at that point. I've forgotten where he is now, but in this presentation at Usenix, which is real professionals get together at this conference. He talks about how DevOps is a lot like business processes and the way that businesses work. We're not new. We're not the first ones to run into these problems of scale and the problems of work in process and all this kind of stuff. It's been, business people have been doing it for a long time, particularly in things like manufacturing. And so, Ben Rockwood in this video goes through and says, these are the founders of the technologies and the ideas that we're using, but they came to it from business and manufacturing. Great video, really useful to watch. This is an interesting novel. It's a story. It's got characters that have backstories, all that kind of stuff, and it's a really it was derived from a book that came out in 1993 that was called The Goal. And the book, The Goal, was about a manufacturing plant and how this guy was, put in charge of running this plant, and they were going to shut the plant down if he didn't get his efficiencies up, and blah 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 blah. Well, Gene Kim and Kevin Bear and a couple other people put this book together, and they took that same premise and said, let's write about the way enterprise computing works and the way DevOps can make things better in enterprise computing, and let's turn it into a story so that people can understand it from the perspective of a story. And so this one's worth reading too. Very interesting. This was one of the original books that came out around DevOps, and particularly around this idea of continuous delivery, which is part of the whole DevOps thing, and pretty cool stuff. And then this one is probably the one that put it onto the map and made it so that people could understand what was going on. Written, of course, by Gene Kim, Patrick Dubois, and a couple other people. This one was really cool and really set the world on fire and made it so people could understand the background for this DevOps stuff. DevOps is not about tools. It's not about technologies. It's mostly about culture that says we can, in this culture, we can do a better job, and we can spend time to create the tools that we need to make it so that our job is doable. And so this one's, if you get into the DevOps world, you're going to end up reading this book sometime because everybody else has. You better too.